Rome, the empire that crushed kings, toppled nations, and claimed to be the hand of the gods on earth. Her legions marched like thunder, her rulers spoke like deities. And yet, there was a day when Rome shook at the name of a single woman. Not a Roman noble, not a queen of marble palaces, a barbarian queen, wild to Roman eyes, but to her people, the living spirit of vengeance. She rose from the misty forests of Britannia with fire in her hair and a war cry that echoed across the sea. This is not just a story of war. It's a story of fury, of loss, of the moment when the pride of an empire met the wrath of the gods, and when the embers settled, Rome would never forget her name, Boudica. Part 1, Flames Before the Storm. The year is AD 60. In Rome, the streets still buzz with the spectacle of Nero, the young, theatrical, and dangerously unpredictable emperor. But far to the north, in the damp, untamed province of Britannia, another story was beginning, one the marble halls of Rome could not control. Here the air is thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Ancient forests stretch for miles, their branches whispering in tongues older than Latin. Stone circles mark the places where ancestors spoke to gods, and the wind carries voices that no Roman priest would dare to hear. Among the tribes of Britannia, the Iceni stood proud. They lived not in palaces, but in roundhouses of timber, clay, and thatch. They slept beside the fire, dreamed to the sound of owls, and honored their gods beneath the open sky. Wealth was not measured in coins, but in courage, kinship, and honor. Their queen was Boudica, tall, fierce, with hair the color of flame and eyes like drawn steel. By her side had stood her husband, King Prasutagus, who held a fragile alliance with Rome. When he died, part of his kingdom was to remain with his family, the rest to Rome. A balance between forest and marble, freedom and imperial rule. But Rome does not share, Rome takes. When Prasutagus breathed his last, the legions did not come to offer condolences. They came with tax collectors, with officials hardened by years of war, and with them came arrogance. Roman soldiers forced their way into Iceni homes, seizing wealth, confiscating weapons, taxing the land as if it had always belonged to the empire. They mocked Celtic rituals as superstition, their homes as hovels, their warriors as savages. And then came the cruelty that would burn itself into history. Before the eyes of her people, Boudica was flogged until her back was a lattice of blood. Before the eyes of their mother, her two young daughters were violated by Roman soldiers. The ground drank the blood. The air held the silence of 1,000 unspoken screams. In that moment, something far more dangerous than fear was born. Do you believe Rome was truly invincible, or was pride its greatest weakness? Tell me in the comments. Secret password number 1, the Queen's Fury. Type it if you're still here. Part 2, Wrath of the Gods. Among the Celts, the gods did not sit distant in marble temples. They walked the earth, breathed in the forests, and bled when their people were wronged. To harm the Iceni was to wound the land itself. When Boudica rose, she did not speak as a widow or a queen. She spoke as the voice of the ancestors, and the tribes listened. Old rivalries dissolved. The Trinovantes, once enemies of the Iceni, joined her cause. The war to come was not just a rebellion, it was a holy reckoning. But before any sword was drawn, there were rituals. In a secluded clearing, under the gnarled arms of ancient oaks, the Druids, keepers of the unseen, built towering pyres. Drums beat in a steady, rising rhythm, like the heartbeat of the earth. The air filled with the smoke of burning herbs and the metallic tang of blood. Animals were sacrificed. Warriors marked their skin with blood and charcoal. They called upon Andraste, the Celtic goddess of war, to ride with them. And before the gathered tribes, Boudica stood in her chariot, its wheels lined with scythe-like blades. She raised her hands to the sky and swore, "For every tear my daughters shed, I will spill a river of Roman blood. For every lash upon my back, I will carve fear into the heart of their empire. And Rome will remember the name of the Iceni until the end of days." Spears pounded against shields. War cries ripped through the air. This was not a march. It was a summoning of something primal, something older than Rome itself. Do you think spiritual power can lead a people to victory, or only to destruction? Share your thoughts below. And the first Roman city to face their fury would burn before the sun set. Part 3, the day Rome trembled. The first to fall was Camulodunum, a proud Roman settlement, gleaming with marble streets and stone villas built right over the sacred soil of the Celts. To the empire, it was a beacon of civilization, the proof that Roman order could tame any land. To Boudica, it was a scar carved into her people's heart, a daily reminder of stolen freedom. Her army struck like thunder over a restless sea. The war cries of the tribes echoed through the streets, clashing against the screams of panic. Shields slammed, blades flashed, and the air itself seemed to shake as the defenders crumbled before the onslaught. The temple to Claudius, a towering monument to Roman power, became a pyre. Flames licked the heavens, and the smoke turned the midday sun into a red, vengeful eye. No quarter was given. Men, women, children, all met the steel of vengeance. To Rome, it was savagery. To the Celts, it was balance restored, the land reclaiming what had been stolen. Word of the slaughter raced faster than any legion could march. Londinium, a young city destined to become London, felt the tremor of fear long before the horizon turned black with smoke. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus faced an impossible choice. Stand and fight with too few soldiers, or abandon the city to save his army for the battles to come. He chose abandonment. When Boudica arrived, the streets were almost silent, the calm before a storm of iron and fire. What followed was destruction without mercy. Temples cracked and toppled. Markets burned until they collapsed into the earth. Streets became rivers of ash, glowing with embers where houses once stood. Verulamium, next in her path, suffered the same fate. By the time the fires died, 3 cities lay in ruin. In Rome, whispers spread like a plague through the marble corridors of power. 3 cities burned, 4 legions shattered, tens of thousands led by a woman who defied an empire. Tell me, was Boudica the savior of her people, or did her vengeance go too far? But even as the smoke curled into the sky, Rome was not finished. The empire had been wounded, but it was far from dead. Secret password number 2, the roar of the defeated. Comment it if you're still with me. Part 4, pride meets steel. While cities smoldered and the name Boudica carried like a curse on the wind, Rome prepared its reply. Governor Suetonius gathered what forces he could, around 10,000 legionaries, a fraction of Boudica's estimated 100,000 warriors. But Rome had no intention of meeting the Britons on open rolling fields where numbers could overwhelm them. Instead, Suetonius chose the killing ground, a narrow defile flanked by woods, where the Celtic horde could not surround his troops. Here, discipline would face fury. The legions formed their wall of shields, a living barrier of iron. Behind it, pila were readied, swords waited to be drawn. At the edges, cavalry prepared to charge like the claws of a closing trap. When the Britons charged, the earth shook with their cries. Chariots raced ahead, scythe blades glinting in the pale light. But the Roman line held. Volley after volley of javelins tore into the mass. Then the wall advanced, step by step, relentless, driving the rebels back into the press of their own numbers. The cavalry struck, slamming into the flanks. What had begun as a tidal wave of warriors became a crush of bodies with nowhere to run. When the dust finally settled, more than 70,000 Britons lay dead. Rome had bled, but Rome had won. Boudica, seeing her people destroyed, chose a fate shrouded in legend. Some say she drank poison, others that she vanished into the forests, becoming part of the land she fought for. If you were Boudica, would you have fought to the bitter end, or disappeared into legend? But even in defeat, some victories cannot be erased. Part 5, the people's price. While governors and queens etched their names into history, while legions and war bands clashed for the right to call themselves victorious, it was the ordinary people who endured the deepest wounds. In Rome, the rebellion was spoken of with a mix of fascination and unease. Merchants gossiped about the barbarian queen in shaded porticos. Senators debated the cost of holding Britannia while sipping wine in marbled chambers. And yet, outside those walls, life continued. The bakers rose before dawn, kneading dough by candlelight. Mothers fetched water from public fountains, their laughter mixing with the clatter of amphorae. Children chased one another through narrow alleys, wooden swords in hand, playing at being gladiators, blissfully unaware of the real blood being spilled an ocean away. But across the sea, in Britannia, life had been reshaped by fire. Here, the air still carried the bitter scent of smoke months after the cities had burned. The fields that had once been golden with grain now lay in ruin, blackened stubble stretching to the horizon. Merchants stood in what was left of their market stalls, hands trembling as they sifted through ash, hoping for a single coin, a single salvageable item. Fathers rebuilt walls with splintered wood and mud, the memories of fallen sons too fresh to speak aloud. Mothers walked the edges of battlefields, searching for loved ones, the silence broken only by the caw of circling crows. Even those who had escaped the sword found themselves prisoners of loss. Hunger gnawed at villages as stores of food seized or destroyed left bellies empty. Trade routes had been severed, bridges burned, not just by the rebels, but by Roman reprisals meant to crush any lingering resistance. The rebellion had not simply taken lives. It had torn apart the fragile fabric that held daily life together. The invisible threads of trust, safety, and community had been shredded. It is easy to speak of queens who roar and emperors who command. It is simple to record the number of dead and call it history. But history is also written in the quiet grief of those whose names will never appear in the annals. The weaver who lost her loom. The child who lost his home. The farmer who walks his field and knows it will not yield this year. Or the next. How many times, even now, do we see the same story? Nations clash. Leaders boast of triumphs. And yet it is always the people, the bakers, the merchants, the farmers, who carry the rubble of war on their backs. Part 6. An immortal memory. Centuries have passed since the smoke of Boudica's war curled into the skies of Britannia. Empires have risen and fallen, kings have come and gone, but her name still rides the wind. In the heart of London, far from the wild forests she once called home, her bronze figure stands near the Houses of Parliament. She is frozen in motion, hair streaming like fire, arms raised high in defiance, her daughters beside her, and her war chariot bristling with blades. Every passerby sees her, though few truly understand the weight of what she represents. Rome won the war. On paper, the rebellion was crushed. But some victories are more fragile than they appear, and some defeats echo louder than triumph. Boudica's revolt became more than a single chapter in the history of Roman Britain. It became a symbol, a reminder that even the most powerful empires are not untouchable, that resistance can rise from the most unexpected of places, and that a single voice, if loud enough, can make an entire empire tremble. The Romans may have silenced her in life, but in memory she speaks louder than ever. Her defiance is carved into stone, cast into metal, and whispered in classrooms and taverns alike. And in every retelling her spirit grows. To the Celts, she was the embodiment of honor avenged. To the Romans, she was a warning, the proof that even their gods could be challenged. To us, centuries later, she is a mirror reflecting a truth we still live with. Power can conquer land, but it cannot conquer the idea of freedom. Look at the world today. How many leaders stand unchallenged because they believe they cannot be opposed? How many people live under rules they did not choose, waiting for someone to rise? Perhaps Boudica's greatest legacy is not the cities she burned, nor the legions she destroyed. It is the whisper she left behind, the one that slips into the ear of the oppressed and says, "No one has the right to crush a people." Secret password number 3, no one bows forever. If you've made it here, comment it to let me know you've stayed through to the very end. Do you think her defiance truly changed Rome? Or was its real power in inspiring those who came after? Conclusion: the queen who made Rome tremble. Boudica's revolt was more than a clash of armies. It was a roar against arrogance, a refusal to kneel when kneeling was the safer choice. She stood not because victory was certain, but because justice demanded it. And though Rome claimed the battlefield, she claimed something far greater, a place in history that no empire could erase. Her story forces us to ask hard questions. How many times has power disguised itself as civilization? How often has order been used to justify domination? And how many voices like hers have been silenced before they could speak? Boudica's fire may have burned in the 1st century, but its embers are still alive. Every time someone refuses to be broken, every time a people rises to reclaim their dignity, the spirit of the warrior queen rides again. So I ask you, if you stood where she stood, watching your home taken and your people crushed, would you rise, or would you bow? If you believe that no one bows forever, type it in the comments now. Like this video if Boudica's story has moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more tales of defiance, power, and the truce empires hoped you'd forget. Because as long as we remember, they never truly win,